everyone. I'm Denise Garth, Chief Strategy Officer at Majesco, and you're listening to the Future of Insurance Industry Leaders podcast series. Follow along as I interview the best and brightest leaders in the insurance industry and insurtech landscape to bring you the latest in digital transformation, innovation, industry trends, challenges, and opportunities, as well as next-gen technologies. We use our experience to anticipate what's next without losing sight of what's now. Stay tuned to find out your next now. Welcome, everybody, to today's Future of Insurance podcast series. I am thrilled today to have one of our key customers joining us, Matt Crum, who is the president of Frank Winston Crum. Welcome, Matt.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Matt, I always like to start off every podcast. I think everybody knows everybody in this industry because it's like a little community, but I find sometimes not everybody does. So why don't you give a little bit of background about yourself, Frank Winston Crum, and our partnership?
Hi, I'm Matt Crum, president of Frank Winston Crum. I'm also co-president of our affiliated PEO, Frank Crum. FWCI is part of the broader Frank Crum organization that has several companies, but the company specifically started as a Florida-based workers' comp carrier and back in 2003, and we've grown to a multi-state specialty carrier, writing work comp, commercial casualty, commercial package, and excess liability across 40 plus states.
Great. So from a market perspective, you guys started out with workers' comp and you moved into specialty, and specialty has really been at the forefront. They're seeing tremendous growth because of the shifting or growing risks and the products needed and customer expectations. Where do you see the opportunities for growth and innovation over the next few years from a specialty market perspective, Matt?
I think it's the market's definitely growing. The needs of customers is changing and evolving, and the needs of our agents and MGAs and distribution partners is changing and evolving. And I would say it's always been the case that the market evolves and changes with the introduction of technology and AI. Or I would say that the pace of change has accelerated, and we need to move fast. And carriers and MGAs need to be responsive to their customers. From a product perspective, AI is streamlining operations across the insurance ecosystem, from vendors to carriers to MGAs to agencies. Everyone, it seems, is embracing AI in their own way. In my mind, as organizations continue to embrace AI, costs are going to go down. And so the cost inputs in the insurance ecosystem are going to go down, and you should see that affecting rates and pricing.
So that really kind of ties into a topic you and I talked about, and that's customer expectations and needs for different products to match their changing risk needs, but also help that protection gap, close that protection gap. Over the last few years, we've seen the cost of insurance increase, particularly in personal lines from an auto and a homeowner's perspective, but even in some of the commercial or specialty lines, people have had to kind of pull back, or businesses have had to kind of pull back because of the financial parameters that they had. With that shift of use of technology and the different types of products, how do you approach this to meet their needs and kind of help close that protection gap, Matt?
As I said previously, the customer needs and expectations changing aren't new. We are pretty heavy in the construction and the contractor space, and the insurance requirements to get on a job site are changing. And if you want to play in that space, we need to evolve. We need to, one, be able to gather enough data to make underwriting decisions and to evolve our insurance products, and two, to meet the customer where they are. And I think leveraging technology, leveraging our data, allowing us to make better decisions and be more responsive to our customer needs. You need a strong technology partner, and we have that in Majesco.
When you started off on this business transformation from a technology perspective, it was a big commitment. What were your drivers of change when you began to look at a different technology foundation that could really help you meet the needs of your customers in the market shifts?
Previously, what drove this change was the scalability. We've been growing pretty rapidly over the last few years, and our legacy systems were becoming a bottleneck for us. That meant on the top line as we grew geographically, and then product expansion. We were having some struggles building out our products, being responsive to the market, kind of what I was saying earlier. And we weren't as responsive as we would like. We couldn't bring new products to market and adjust our existing products as fast as we wanted to. And we understood that we needed to be more responsive. And so that's really what was the impetus of us going out and looking for a new system.
That's the case with so many carriers sitting on legacy. So that process of selecting a technology foundation, it is so much more than features and functions. These days, it's about enabling the business transformation and ensuring it can adapt to your point of wanting flexibility and scalability and keeping up with that pace of technology adoption. What were your drivers and technology requirements? And then how did you run your selection process and determine your way forward? I know you and I talked about that, and you were pretty specific about what you wanted.
Yeah, I thought our selection process, I was really proud of our team and the team who ran the process. It took a very long time, honestly. In full transparency, I thought that they were digging almost a little too much and being a little too thorough, but I'm glad they did it because it took us a long time to make it to come to a final decision. But it did. It started with going out, scanning the market, looking for partners and companies that had the features and functions that we were looking for. That's really the first pass, the checkbox. And then once we narrowed that list down, we started digging in with the team and the business units created their requirements at a high level. And we'd go through different iterations with different vendors and interviewing them and looking at how configurable is their system without heavy customization,
Yeah.
speed to product iteration, and finding a partner and a culture fit that was committed to an innovative roadmap. And as we went through that process, a few different vendors bubbled up to the top. We actually made them prove what they said that they could do. And so we went through really a blueprinting process, and we asked you and some others to show us what the system could do. And then ultimately we made a decision.
Yeah, that kind of proof of concept, so to speak, in that blueprinting process really, I think, further kind of builds that trust because what people say and what people could do sometimes doesn't always match up.
Correct.
Picking that right partner mattered in it. Quite frankly, it's a risky process because you're betting your business on it for a long period of time. So obviously there was the immediate needs that you had in all the capabilities and functionality, but you also needed to look kind of long term. What did you look for a partner strategically? If you could talk about your blueprint process, that would be great.
Sure. So we were looking for a partner. One, the partner needed, we were looking for a proven player in the space, someone who, there are lots of startups in the technology space, and technology is changing quite a bit. While that's important, and I think it's important for our team to embrace change and new technology, we wanted someone with a track record because it, like you said, it was a very big move for us. And our team had, obviously, we're familiar with Majesco and the other vendors, some of the other vendors that we were looking at. Our team was, familiar with some people on your team, and we had extensive, I mean, this whole process, it took well over a year from start to really contract before we started to build. That included the blueprint process. And so once we narrowed it down and really kind of we thought our decision was going to be Majesco, we walked through really a final proof of concept blueprinting process that took several months. It was heavy, heavy work on both sides, from Majesco side and our team, gathering requirements, making sure that your product and your team could do what we needed done. And we went through that blueprinting process, and it was really a team vote. So I actually stayed out of the voting process, and I had each business unit basically let them, and they never actually saw any of the costs or anything. I'd let them basically make a decision on which technology platform that they wanted to go with, which platform best suited their needs. And that's how we made the decision.
That's pretty cool. You talked about culture, and culture is so important because all of these projects, I don't care what they are, there's always going to be a hiccup here and there. So you got to have trust and you got to have a culture between the two organizations that will work through it in a positive way. Talk about that culture aspect.
Yeah, it's like you said, these projects can certainly fray nerves. They're never easy. There's always challenges. Something's always going to break or not go to plan. And picking the right partner who is willing to work with us is extremely important. And I would say that we liked your team. It just so happened we were blessed, lucky that many of my team members knew many of your team members already. And so we had that comfort going in. However, after we've gone live or throughout the project, you guys exhibited that as a true partner. And then after we've gone live, usually when you go live, the project isn't really done. You got some day two items, and we certainly have had that. And your team has, proven that you've continued to be willing to work with us on as we've iterated and improved the product.
Yeah, and I think it continues as you look to bring new products to market and
Hmm.
stuff too, because
Yep.
it's never done, to your
No,
point. It's never done.
no.
So one of the things you and I talked about, and you started to talk about it a little bit at the beginning, is about AI. You shared with me that you've been talking to your leadership team and your board about this focus on reducing friction in the business and in the business processes. Talk about what you mean and how a new operating model and technology foundation is really important to this and how AI is going to fit into what you guys are doing.
So we play largely, we do some middle market stuff, but most of what we do is small commercial. And our customers, at the end of the day, our customers are insureds, but also, as importantly, our agents. And what they're trying to do in the small commercial space is place business as fast as possible and service that business so their end customer can go about their day. The end customer really doesn't enjoy the insurance buying process. They don't want to, they are forced to buy insurance.
Yeah.
Right. And so you've got the product build, and we have to check the boxes and provide an insurance product that they need. And there's that risk transfer that, that we talked about earlier. However, the act of buying insurance and amending your policy and servicing that business for the agent and the insured is not a process that anyone really loves. And so the way we think about is how do we reduce that transactional friction? So how do we make it easy for our insured to do what they need to do and for our agent? And technology, frankly, enables us to do that, allows us to do that. But AI is actually making that significantly easier. But we also talk about reducing friction internally too, because the more friction we can reduce internally, fewer manual handoffs, fewer manual processes, things like that. One, it brings the total cost of insurance will go down. It allows us to service our agents and insureds easier, and allows us to focus on the value added tasks rather than the minutia and the manual administrative process. So some of that is going to be solved by AI. Some of it's just about managing, developing processes and leveraging existing technology. But from an AI perspective, we're already leveraging AI on the underwriting side, giving our underwriters more information, streamlining processes, automating workflows. And then we're doing it kind of on the middle of the business, the servicing side, automating workflows. And then on the back end, where the claims happen, AI and claims is going to be, in my mind, is going to be massive. We're already starting some proof of concepts to help our adjusters adjudicate and move claims off their desk faster.
That's awesome. I really truly do believe that we're going to see in the next 5 to 7 years massive reduction for those that really adopt and really embrace new technology, in particular AI, to really create a whole different level of automation. The expense ratios are going to drop significantly, and it's going to be a realignment, I think, of leaders in the industry that have really committed to that to be able to provide affordable insurance.
And if you think about it, I would even go further. So you're 100% right. From a carrier perspective, it will
Yep.
absolutely, I fully expect it to reduce our expense ratio. But then if you look at up the entire value chain of insurance
Mhm.
from, let's look at workers' comp or the lines we write, workers' comp or general liability. We don't write commercial auto, but think about the different vendors and really the loss costs that are embedded in the loss ratio is as AI gets embedded in some of those processes, your loss costs therefore should go down. So it's not just an expense ratio reduction. Theoretically, your loss ratio should go down as well. And so the
Yes.
overall cost of insurance, depending on the line of business you're writing and how pervasive AI can be in that line of business, there's going to be some that where it's more beneficial than others. I would expect prices to go down.
I would too. And I think the quality and consistency of the information we provide to the agents and the customers will improve as well.
I'll give you a perfect example. I was actually on a podcast a few months ago with one of our attorneys, our defense counsel, and we both agree that insurance defense and legal spend in the insurance space with AI, law firms and that are embracing AI, it's definitely going to be deflationary in that regard. And the legal spend on the loss ratio side of the business is pretty high.
Yeah.
And I think attorneys who are leverage AI are going to be on the bleeding edge of this, and they're going to be able to provide the same level of service at
Mhm.
a reduced cost. That cost reduction should flow down to the policyholder, really.
Yeah, it should. That hidden cost that we all have to pay for in this industry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All that you guys have done from a transformation standpoint, what's next for you guys for Frank Winston Crum?
Well, we just rolled out a new product, a commercial package product. That's been great. That's really first quarter this year. And so it's expanding that product, seeing how well it works in the marketplace. Early signs are positive. Continuing our geographic expansion. Right now we're licensed and we write business in 40 states, but we're more concentrated throughout the Southeast. And now that we're about a year on to our new system with Majesco, it's now time to start focusing on growth, on geographic expansion and additional product expansion. So building out our existing products, but also adding products to that.
Yeah, that's great. You guys have really gone through an amazing transformation and looking at how it can really grow your business into the future and really service your customers and a broader customer base that you're really going to get. What words of advice would you give to your peers in the industry, Matt, that haven't even started this journey yet or thinking about it?
Insurance is one of the few products where your cost of goods sold are unknown at the time of binding. And so while it's great to talk about top line and growth, change, and all this, staying disciplined and underwriting disciplined is first and foremost the most important thing. And
Yeah.
so I think finding that balance between growth and adaptability and change and keeping that underwriting discipline is first and foremost, it's so important.
Yeah. So I always like to end the podcast with the same question for everybody. If you could pick one word or phrase to describe the future of insurance, what would it be and why?
Probably adaptable. I think technology, historically, technology has prevented, in some ways, carriers from moving as fast as they want to, being as adaptable, meeting their customers where they need to be. And over the last couple decades, we've leaned into technology so much more, and we're so dependent on it. At times, it can feel like a handcuff. With developments in technology, improvements in technology, and with I think it's going to allow for more adaptability across the insurance space. And I think the carriers who are able to harness that and reduce their speed to market and meet their customers where they are going to find success.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that adaptability really creates the opportunity to expand what it is that you offer out into the industry, and you're not limited to what you've done in the past.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Matt, we really appreciate the partnership with you and your team. You guys have done an amazing job, and we're looking forward to some exciting times ahead, especially everything that you're doing with AI.
Thank you. Me too. You guys have been great for us. We appreciate it.
That's it for this week's episode of Future of Insurance Industry Leaders podcast. Subscribe to our market leading podcast series available wherever you get your podcast from. Thank you for listening and be sure to tune in the next time.